What is up, everybody? This week in Clown World has made a comeback, and pretty much I'm going to read and talk about this article right here from The Atlantic's cultural writer Derek Thompson. America is running on fumes. In film, science, and economy, the U.S. has fallen out of love with the hard work of ushering new ideas into the world. Yeah, if you guys want to notice something like about our culture, really like our political culture, it hasn't really changed from the mid 1990s. The Rush Limbaugh slash Newt Gingrich revolution against the Clintons. I mean, if you guys really look at Bill Clinton now compared to like your typical the squad Democrat, you know what I'm saying, like an AOC, Ilhan Omar type. They're completely different people because Bill Clinton is closer to like a Joe Manchin nowadays than he is to like a Bernie Sanders. I mean, let's be real here. Like, the culture has really moved left really fast in the last like 20 years, and like nothing's really changed. I mean, other than like the fact that we got a lot more sensitive on like issues like LGBT, a lot more people, a lot more pro-choice. But if you look at creativity wise, there hasn't been anything done. It's like we've been in an era of Ross Dohat said, decadence. But let's read this. Let's start. Oh yeah, and sign up for Derek's newsletter here. Yeah, he has an Atlantic newsletter. But let's start with simple mystery. What happened to good old? Happened to original blockbuster movies? Throughout the 20th century, Hollywood produced a healthy number of entirely new series. The top movies of 1998, including Titanic, Saving Private Ryan, and There's Something About Mary, were almost all based on original screenplays. But since then, the U.S. box office has been steadily overrun by numbers and superheroes. Iron Man 2, Jurassic Park 3, Toy Story 4. Of the top 10 grossing films in 2019, 9 were sequels or live-action remakes of animated Disney movies, with one exception, Joker, being a great prequel of another superhero franchise. And what does it say about like Hollywood losing their creativity? I say like around like 2012, like after the Avengers got really hot, like Hollywood just had this great idea of creating like movie franchises like DC. Like DC started their DCAU after the Avengers in 2012. That's pretty much the movie that started the whole like new phase into like superhero movies, like shared universes and all that. Because before that, like movies were like originally like one shots instead of like being like a part of a whole like universe like the MCU is. And as you see in '98, it was a diversity of movies like Titanic. James Cameron directed Titanic, which was a epic. It was like an epic slash romance drama. You got Saving Private Ryan, which was a war drama. And there's something about Mary, which was a romantic comedy. And romantic comedy, I say in the last like 10 years or so, romantic comedy's been dead. I mean, like there hasn't been no romantic comedy box office hits. I haven't really thought. I mean, let me know in the comments because I haven't really seen a box office like romantic comedy hit in like a long time. I swear, it's like all the creativity has went into Netflix nowadays, like Netflix, Hulu, HBO Now. It's like moved on to streaming because, from what I heard in Hollywood, basically they're scared of new ideas and they want to go with the safe bet. And the thing is, Hollywood is mainly ran by boomers. You know what I'm saying? They don't really take new ideas from the new generation because I mean, if you see the executives, most of the executives they come from an older generation where they stuck with what they know from that generation, what's sold. And they don't really pay attention to TikTok generation because they want a different culture. But some people think this is awful. Some think it's fine. I'm more interested in the fact that it's happening. America used to go to movie theaters to watch new characters and new stories. Now they go to movie theaters with recent murders, sales, and familiar storylines. A few years ago, I saw this shit from explanation and incrementalism as something specific to pop culture. That changed last year when I read a 2020 paper on the decline of originality of science with a decidedly non-Hollywood title, Stagnation and Scientific Incentives. New ideas no longer fuel economic growth like it once did. The economists I can't pronounce that, Bhattacharya and Mikko Pakanelin wrote. In the past few decades, citations have become a key metric for evaluating scientific research, which has pushed scientists to write papers that they think will be popular for other scientists. This causes many of them to cluster around a small set of popular subjects rather than take a gamble that might open a new field of study. To illustrate this shift, the co-authors include a simple drawing of paper, which is another big problem with the current the liberal ecosystem. The echo bubble. You know what I'm saying? The thing about the right is they strawman the left as all being a hive mind, but they're not really a hive mind. Because the thing is, a lot of liberals are too scared to say anything about like the AOC socialist types. Yeah, they're scared of them. They're scared of how they're going to react, so they really don't say anything. But yeah, if you remember correctly what you thought when you first saw this picture, hey, it looks like Hollywood. Driven by popularity metrics, scientists like movie studios have become more likely to tinker in power domains and pursue risky original projects that might bloom into new franchises. Not that writers, directors, scientists, and researchers can't physically come up with new ideas, but rather something in the air, some institutions of our culture was constrain the growth of new ideas. In science, as in cinema, incrementalism is an exploration. It all interestingly started sometime in the 90s. It did basically like after 9/11. Basically we didn't really push ourselves anymore. No. It was basically the Cold War. Basically, after the Cold War, America got really complacent. Like we thought we were the center of the world and all that. So just got incredibly complacent. And now, 20 years later, China has really really has become a superpower. And like our elites are like, whoa, how did this happen? See, I can't get the thought in my head. Truly, new ideas don't feel growth the way it once did. I mean, that's my speculation on it, but because I grew up in the because I spent 10 years. I spent my first 7 years in the 80s. That was the Reagan Bush era. That was like the Cold War. Then I spent my formative years in the 90s, the Clinton years. Then I spent my early 20s in the Bush year where I was in the Army. So, yeah, it really stagnated between then. The conclusion is widely shared. Scientific knowledge has been a clear secular decline since the early 1970s. All right, let's get back to it. 1970s. And one pair of Swiss researchers put it. University of Chicago scholar James Evans has found that as the number of scientific researchers have grown, progress is slow. Oh, basically a bureaucracy. Perhaps because science is so overrun by the glut of information in the domain that they're clustering around the same subjects and citing a few papers. In entrepreneurship, setting aside a spike during the coronavirus pandemic, U.S. business formation has been declining since the 1970s. One of America's most important sources of entrepreneurship is immigration, because immigrants are far more likely than native-born Americans to start billion dollar companies. But the U.S. is in a deep immigration depression at the moment, which was caused a lot by Trump. The whole Breitbart, MAGA ecosystem, which was pretty hardcore nativist. Which, yeah. And as you see, Derek Thompson is a type of a liberal, neoliberal type of dude that wants like more immigrants to fuel America's growth. Because that's how America grew, but basically from like the immigrant contribution. Let's look at this. Until about a century ago, the U.S. was built as type-like colleges and universities at a dazzling clip, but the U.S. hasn't built a new elite university in many decades. The federal government used to build new agencies to deal with novel problems like the National Institutes for Health Centers for Disease Control. After World War II, were the Advanced Research Project Agency, later known as DARPA after Sputnik. Although the pandemic embarrassed the CDC, no major conversations are underway about creating new institutions to deal with the problem of the 21st century pandemic. It just creates more bureaucracy, another like deep state, which is a big problem right now because we got too much of a bureaucratic state that doesn't really have a clue what to do and is really out of touch with like most of the American public now. But if you believe in the virtue of novelty, these are destructive trends. Today's scientists are less likely to pose new ideas. Businesses are struggling to break into the market with new ideas. U.S. immigration policies are constricting the rival people most likely to found companies that promote new ideas, like Steve Jobs. And we are less likely than previous generations to build institutions that advance new ideas. We've become stagnated. And a lot of this is from the boomer generation, or like the the Boomer generation or the Watergate babies generation. Basically, the Watergate babies generation changed a lot. And the thing is, like, these people are still in power. Like what, Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell. These guys have been in office since the 80s. Like, I was a little kid, and like Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi were in office since then, since 1987. Yeah, I was 4 years old in 1987, and those two were in office. And there's two, they're still in, as well as Chuck Grassley, and those cats are still in office in 2021. I mean, it's amazing there's no new ideas coming out. We still vote for like octogenarians. Oh yeah, add Dianne Feinstein as well. We vote for dinosaurs, and this is what we get. We vote for dinosaurs. We stick as dinosaurs as corporate heads, and it's basically what we get, like the endless 60s. New ideas simply don't feel growth the way it once did. I mean, because we're the people that used to push to go to the moon. Now we don't really push to go to the moon enough. Now we push to be the most woke as possible. I mean, current liberal society is really pushing the idea to be the most woke, the most in tune, the most empathetic. Yeah, it's really sad. When you wake up in the 1900s, cities have been entirely, as you see here, skyscrapers, people riding bicycles, all inventions of this period. The Sears catalog, the Carver bus, and aspirin are new arrivals. People recently enjoyed their first sip of Coca-Cola. I mean, innovation. Their first Kellogg's cornflakes and their first bite of what we call an American hamburger. When you fall asleep in 1875, there was no such thing as a Kodak camera or recorded music or an instrument for capturing motion pictures for film projection. By 1900, we had the first version of all three, the simple box camera, the photograph, and the cinematograph. As you slept, Thomas Edison unveiled his famous light bulb in electrified parts of New York. And the closest we have to that now is Elon Musk, and like he's getting hate on by a large amount of people for some weird and largely it's coming from the left because he's a billionaire. I mean, it's so backwards. It's been a golden age for building institutions as well. Johns Hopkins University, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Chicago were all founded while you were zonks. In the 1870s, a few Ivy League colleges messed around with rugby and haphazardly invented the sport of football. In 1891, James Naismith, a YMCA instructor in Massachusetts, who was from Canada, erected a peace basket in a gymnasium and invented the game of basketball. 4 years later, just 10 miles away, another YMCA, the physical ed teacher William Morgan braided the same surf from tennis and elements of team pass from handball to create volleyball. How can you be astonished and thrilled by the fact that all this happened in 25 years? It's quarter century hibernation today with me dozing off in 1996 and waking up in 2021. You would wonder at the smartphones and the internet, but the physical world would feel much the same. Compare cars have replaced horses as the way to get across town with apps that have replaced phones as the best way to order takeout. If you believe in the virtual novelty in the world of atoms, the golden years were, basically like after basically like time froze. Basically like culture froze. Yeah, basically like there ain't much difference from 96 and 2001. Like the internet existed in 1996, but like way less people using the internet. TV, I mean basically like other than like smartphones and like apps like TikTok and social media and all that, like the basic world hasn't really changed that much. I mean, especially the talking points. But this is not the first time someone has accused America's invention engine of running fumes in the 21st century. In 2020, the venture capitalist Mark Anderson published the instant classic essay, It's Time to Build, which earns more innovation, entrepreneurship in public health, housing, education, transportation. The problem is inertia. We want these things more than we want to prevent these things. The same year, Ross Douthat, who I talked about earlier, published The Decadent Society, which I brought up earlier, which levels severe criticism of languishing U.S. creativity. I recommend reading The Decadent Society. It's pretty much where I would fit somewhere in a culture where, like a Catholic, you know what I'm saying? Like somewhat Catholic, Catholic conservative. These works are partly descendants of Tyler Cohen's book, The Great Stagnation, which diagnosed a slowdown in America's innovative mojo. The complacent class was observed that Americans are self-segregated into comfortable echo chambers rather than taking risks and challenging themselves. And as you say, like I'm dealing with this Saudi army echo chamber, which really thinks I'm like some kind of weird commie liberal that loves Obama. When I mean, I voted for Obama in 2008, and I haven't voted for any Democrats since. No, other than that Kevin guy in the Newsom recall. But otherwise, I pretty much don't vote Democrat anymore because they're hypocrites. They're hypocrites and they love to tax. They love to add ridiculous taxes, but yeah, anyways. Science and technology is much more complicated in the word of 1890s or 1790s, but the fear that none of us left to discover has always been misguided. In the mid 1890s, the U.S. physician Albert Michelson famously declared most of the grand underlying principles have been firmly established. In physical science, it wasn't even 10 years later that Albert Einstein first revolutionized our understanding of space, time, and mass and energy. I don't think there's an overarching reason for our knowledge of stagnation, but let's offer three theories that might collectively explain a good chunk of this complex phenomenon. The big marketplace of attention. Almost every smart cultural producer eventually learns the same lesson. Audiences don't really like brand new things. They prefer familiar surprises, sneakily novel twists on well-known fare. As the biggest movie studios got more strategic about thriving in a competitive global market, they doubled down on established franchises. As the music industry learned more about audience preferences, radio airplay, oh yes, the algorithm, has become more repetitive and the Billboard Hot 100 got more static. Across entertainment, industries that now gravitate towards familiar surprises rather than zany originality. Science is also a transparent marketplace of attention. It has followed the same trajectory as film as music. Scientists know that journals are publishing what the NIH is funding. The citation revolution pushes scientists to write papers that are likely to appeal to an audience of fellow researchers who tend to prefer insights that jive with the background. An analysis of research applications found that NIH and the National Science Foundation have a demonstrated bias against papers that are highly original, preferring no levels of novelty. That's what Fauci works at. Scientists are thus encouraged to focus on subjects they already stand to be popular, which means it's avoiding work that seems too radical to focus on projects or just the right band of familiar and surprising. That says a lot. The world is one big panopticon. We don't fully understand the implication of building a planetary marketplace of attention with everything we do as an audience. Our work, our opinions, our milestones, and our subtle preferences are routinely submitted for public approval online. Now, this makes culture more imitative. If you want to produce popular things, you can easily tell from the internet what's already popular. You're simply more likely to produce more of that thing. The mimetic pressure is part of human nature, but perhaps the internet supercharges this trait, and in the process makes people more hesitant about sharing ideas that aren't already demonstrated prep-approved. As you see, like the biggest, like our big moguls nowadays are like the tech. I mean, they're basically the tech giants. You know what I'm saying? Like the Zuckerbergs, like the Twitter, like Jack Dorsey, like those type of people that own like social media companies. Those are the companies that got really rich in the last like 10 years. That really got ahead in this society in the last 10 years, like the Twitters, the Facebooks. I mean, the Reddits and all that. Like, yeah, it's those type of sites. I mean, the internet's gotten a lot more homogenized these days compared to like 10 years ago. And as you see, we live in the age of creeping gerontocracy. Like, Joe Biden is the oldest president in U.S. history. If he had lost, Donald Trump would have been the oldest president in U.S. history. The average age in Congress has hovered near his all-time high for the past decade. Oh, like I already made that speculation. Like basically, like our elites are our political elites are very, very old. If you look at Canada, if you look at the Canadian Parliament compared to the United States Senate and House, yeah, you can really see an age difference. I mean, let's take a look at the Canadian Parliament right now. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Because Canada has a different set of politics than the U.S. does. It's more of a parliamentary democracy rather than a constitutional republic. And as you see from because Canada still bases their politics on the Brits on the UK. So as you see, like Canadian Parliament, they look more representative of the Canadian population than the U.S. Senate or U.S. House does, which is overwhelmingly rural bias. Yeah, there's an overwhelming rural bias in American politics, and as you see, like you got he's part of the NDP. He's a parliament head of NDP, and he's a Sikh with a turban. That's the type of that's the type of politician who wouldn't be really elected in a red state. Let's look at it. I mean, just look at the hate Ilhan Omar is getting right now. Yeah. I mean, that's because she says weird, dumb shit. But anyway, but as you see, as you see, look at the Canadian House. The Canadian House is a lot more diverse than the American House is. As you see, let's see the U.S. Senate, and as you compare to like the Canadian Parliament and House, look how old and white American on both parties. Look how old and white our political elite is compared to Canada. It's like night and day. I mean, it's really like night and day, isn't it, folks? Isn't it really like night and day on both sides? Like most of our politicians are like too old and too white for like the current diversity of the country. I mean, I'm just being real. It's not a woke talking point. I'm just talking about the current demographics right now. And as you see, like this tilts towards like an older populace, other than the Hawaii senator right here, who was a complete joke, Kamala Harris, and Tammy Duckworth. But otherwise, I mean, this is Democrats. I mean, this is a party that likes to claim they're about diversity and all that. But as you see, it's like what 80-some% white. I mean, the thing is, like, most of the voters, the average Democrat voter is a middle-aged black woman who goes to church. It's a middle-aged, church-going black woman who lives in the South. And look at the Senate. Does that look representative of, like, what church-going black women would vote for? No. No, I mean, because the party got taken over by what highly college-educated white people, and as you see, like it pretty much looks like college, like someone from like a Harvard would vote for. Other than this guy right here is kind of a populist, and you got Bernie, and she's not really like a Wall Street, but basically these are the type of people that Wall Street or like someone from the corporations would like, or someone from like the Ivy League would like. It's not really representative of the Democrat Party nor of the United States. And you got this guy, Mitch McConnell, who's basically been around since I was 1 year old. So basically, that's a big problem of our American politics. I mean, like, our political leaders are just geriatrics, man. He made the same calculation I made earlier. Across business, science, and finance, power is simultaneously concentrated among the elderly. The average age of Nobel Prize laureates has steadily increased in almost every discipline, and so has the average age of NIH grant recipients. And among S&P 500 companies, the average age of income CEOs have increased by more than a decade in the last 20 years. As I've written, America's 55 and older account for less than one-third of the population, but they own two-thirds of the nation's vote. The highest left of West concentration on record. As you see, boomers don't really want to share. Why does it matter that young people have a voice in tech and culture? Because young people are the most defendable source of new ideas in culture and science. They are the least to lose from cultural change and the most to gain from overthrowing legacies and incumbents. And as you see, that's why a lot of younger folks have become more socialist now, because they see capitalism is like unfair and is heavily tilted towards older white people. I mean, let's keep it real here. I mean, but the thing is, yeah, I'll bring that later. In fact, when least scientists die, younger and less than those scientists are more likely to introduce novel ideas. See, the thing is, like, we don't have our young people like really in power. We don't have like any. I mean, there's not that many millennial politicians in power. There's not that many Gen X politicians in power. It's like the baby boomers basically after the 90s basically kept the power and just cut all of us out, especially around that's after the 2008 financial crash or like the whole the buyout and the rise of bureaucracy. It's not like America's creativity is suffering. Rather, modern institutions have found new successful ways to thwart and constrict creativity. so that new ideas are equally likely born but less likely to grow. In his Build essay, Anderson blasts American inability to construct not only wondrous machines but such as supersonic aircraft and flying cars, but also sufficient houses, infrastructure, and mega projects. In a compelling response, Ezra Collins wrote that institutions which Americans build have become biased against action rather than towards it. Like not in my backyard, basically. They have become, in political scientist Francis Fukuyama's term, Gerontocracies, in which too many actors have veto rights over what gets built. That's true in the federal government, it's true in state and local governments, it's true in the private sector. Last year, fewer bills were passed in any year on record. From 1917 to 1970, the Senate took 49 votes to filibuster. The Senate took 49 votes to break filibuster. Man, I'm so slow. I need to work on my reading. Or less than one per year. Since 2010, has averaged 80 such votes annually. The Senate was once known as the cooling saucer of democracy, where populist notions went to chill out a bit. Now it's the iceberg of democracy where legislation dies of opportunity, as you see with the Build Back Better bill. Vetocracy blocks new construction too, especially through endless environmental and safety impact analysis that stop new projects before they begin. Since the 1970s, even progressives champions big government, they worked tirelessly to put new checks on its power. The new protections that condemn new generations to live in infrastructure that is frozen in time. Since the 70s, boomers. The best objection to everything I've written is this a world where young people tend to be in control, where regulatory burdens are blocked mega projects, where new ideas are generally cherished and even perhaps fetishized. It's the internet, more specifically the software industry. If you work on AI or crypto or virtual reality, you probably aren't starved for ideas. You may well be drowning in them. Undeniably, the communication revolution has been the most significant font of new ideas in the past half century. But the vitality of the tech industry in comparison with other industries points out that the U.S. innovation system has devolved from variety to specialization in the last 40 years or so. The U.S. used to provide a broad diversity of patents across many industries, chemistry, biology, and so forth, whereas patents today are more concentrated in the single industry, the software industry, than at any other time on record. We funnel treasure and talent to the world of bits as the world of flesh and steel is decayed around it. As you see, in the past 50 years, climate change has worsened, nuclear power has practically disappeared, construction productivity slowed down, the cost of developing new drugs is soared. It's basically people don't want to adapt or evolve. What I want for the physical world to rediscover the virtual experimentation. I want more newcomers and entrepreneurs, which means I want more immigrants. I want more mega project infrastructure and more moonshot belts in energy and transportation. I want new ways to find funded scientific research. I want non-grifters to find ways to innovate in higher education to build the cost of causing inflation. I want more prizes for audacious breakthroughs in cancer and Alzheimer's and longevity research. As strange as this might sound, I want the federal government to get into the experimentation game too and found new industries to identify and solve the problems that will be created in the right of newness, as CNC and DARPA once did. And finally, like Hollywood discovered a passion for cinematic blockbusters don't have the numbers and title. I mean, this is a well-written article. And basically, I disagree with just a few of the points. I mean, this guy, as you clearly see, this guy is a liberal. This is what a liberal sounds like. That's what a liberal sounds like. They want innovation. They want immigrants to fuel immigration because it helps the whole country and the GDP and all that. But the thing is, we have two sides, one that really hates the rich and one that really hates immigrants, and basically with those two demographics going on, we're like very polarized right now. There's no way like we can come to common ground on anything now. That's the basic cultural war we're in right now in 2021. So give me a like if you feel this video, a dislike if you don't feel this video, and please subscribe. Have a fun weekend. Peace out, y'all. Check out more shorts on Clem Media.